Hi, you're listening to Yellow Glitter, a podcast on mindfulness through the eyes and soul of a gay Asian. I'm your host, Stephen Wakabayashi, and you're listening to a very special episode for this month of February on love, queer Asian love. I'm joined on this episode with Rajiv Khanna. Hi, Rajiv.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so excited to have you. Rajiv Khanna, he, him, his, is a gay second generation Indian American living in San Francisco, California. He is very involved in the South Asian community through volunteering and hosting cultural and queer events, and always loves a good Bollywood dance party.
Oh yeah, I was literally just at one last night, so it was a good time.
Oh, amazing. What was that?
It was actually a queer Bollywood party that they hold here in San Francisco about once a quarter. And it's just a night of debauchery and dancing, choreographed Bollywood sequences. It's amazing.
Amazing, beautiful, and I just absolutely love. I actually really love Bollywood music videos.
Yeah.
They are so interesting. They're first like really elaborate, and they have
Oh
this like
yeah.
beautiful, intricate storyline, and it's so dramatic.
Yeah, my life is pretty much a Bollywood movie, and I've accepted that.
Just like cue the music, cue the lights,
Oh
cue the
yeah.
colors.
Yeah, I'm all about synchronized dancing. So anytime I can learn a routine and make everyone around me learn it and do it to the beat, that gives me life.
Yeah,
So
yeah, amazing. And so we connected through our mutual friend Suds, who I absolutely adore. And because I adore him, I feel like I'm going to adore you so much on this podcast.
I hope so.
Yeah. And so, first question for you is, we connected earlier before this show, and you mentioned you grew up in Rancho Cucamonga near Los Angeles.
That's right. Yeah, the fabulous Rancho Cucamonga.
Yeah, and that's really close to my hometown of West Covina. It's about like 30 minutes away, give or take, right?
Yeah, the
And
Greater LA area.
yeah, yeah. And so I'm just curious from your perspective as an Indian man, let alone a gay Indian man in Rancho Cucamonga, what was it like growing up in that community?
Yeah, so my parents immigrated from India back in, I believe it was 1985. So it was a really different time back then. They were probably the only, maybe one of the few Indian families in Rancho Cucamonga. So it was very apparent that they were different and that we were different. But I think I was lucky enough that at least growing up in elementary and high school, I didn't see it too much because I kind of had this group of other friends of color that we kind of all banded together and hung out. So we kind of found our own little sanctuary there, which was really nice. In fact, so I had a group of 12 friends in high school, six guys, six girls, and it's pretty funny that over time, all six guys ended up coming out over the phase
What?
of like, yeah, over the phase of like 3 or 4 years, and no one had any idea when we became friends that we were all gay.
What? That is,
Yeah.
what was that like? So okay, first question is, out of the six, out of the six boys, which number were you? Were you in the beginning or were you in the later part?
Definitely later. I think I was
Okay.
fifth.
Oh
Yeah.
wow. Okay. And what was it like when the first friend was just like, I'm gay? What was that like?
I think the first one kind of pushed us all further in the closet just because we were like, oh, but we're not, like it was kind of like a shock to all of us because we hadn't admitted it to ourselves back then. But
Oh, yeah.
by like the third or fourth person, like, okay, we get it. We're all gay.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting. And also, from my perspective, back in the 90s, Rancho Cucamonga was not very Asian, right?
Not at all.
Not at
No.
all. Yeah.
So I went to a high school with, I think, almost 4,000 students. And they had maybe 10 Asians at best.
Wow,
Um,
wow, wow.
Yeah, so that was really apparent, and I think because of that, I wasn't really into my Indian culture as much because it was, I wanted to assimilate, fit in, whatever. To the point where I'd actively say like, oh, I don't do that. I don't hang out with Indians. I don't want to eat the food. I was very actively against it up until college, actually. Um, so that was just looking back on it now, it was just such a weird time for me to be so just kind of antagonistic against it.
Yeah, and what was that turning point like of going from I don't really identify with my ethnicity, my parents' experience, but in college, what was that turning point?
Yeah, it was a huge turning point because I now call myself the Queen of the Indians. So it went pretty far.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think when I went to college, I think everyone who goes to college kind of experiences when you first show up, you don't know anyone, right? So you immediately look to build a community of some sort. And it's kind of easy to just fall under like a community that you've kind of been exposed to your entire life. So I just naturally gravitated towards like the Indian groups that existed on campus. And I went to UC Berkeley, so there were a
More.
plethora of
Yes,
Indians
yes.
there. So yeah, I think it was that like just slowly meeting Indians and realizing that they went through the exact experience that I did as an Indian American of figuring out what it means to be both Indian and American. And I think through that I realized that that in itself is its own community, and I decided to take advantage of that and thrive in that.
Yeah. And you also bond. What I've noticed is as I was exploring my Asian identity, especially coming from this white or white passing community growing up, I found that I bonded with friends over this experience of assimilation too.
Hmm.
How we've all tried to assimilate, and as a part of it, kind of this like stripping away of our culture. And in it, we almost become so much more compassionate with ourselves that we had done that. And I think it's an amazing turning point for a lot of Asians to go through that experience.
Right. No, I agree. I mean, I hope that because there's larger populations of Asians now, at least in the areas that we're from, I hope that people don't have to go through that, what we went through. Because it was tough, and I think it back then we didn't even realize it was tough. It's only until now we realize like, oh, we actually had to go through a lot, and we had to ignore and hide and suppress some stuff that we didn't realize we were doing.
Yeah, I remember my mom, she is very Taiwanese, and she was always packing me lunch and packing me all of this Asian food. And
Hmm.
it was so embarrassing for me because one of the only people who, I was not one of the only people, I was the only person in some of my classes when I would have this non American lunch.
Yeah.
And I was picked on. People were like, "What are you eating? That's so weird." And I was just like so embarrassing that I would tell my mom, just like, "Stop cooking it. Like, stop. I don't want this. Just give me
Right.
that peanut butter jelly sandwich. Let me like let me fit in." And it's just like that's just the the tip of the iceberg. It's just so many other things when our culture comes out that people go, "Oh, that's weird. That's not like any of
Yeah.
us."
Yeah, it's interesting that it's always food, right? Because that's the most visual, the most like you can smell it, you can see it, all that stuff. It really makes a kid stand out in school. And I think for me, so I'm vegetarian. I've always been
Yep, yeah,
vegetarian.
yeah.
That's a big part of so we're Hindu, and a lot of not all Hindus, but a lot of Hindus are vegetarian. So that for me was very like it was a sticking point, right? I was the vegetarian kid, and people would ask me why I didn't eat meat. They'd try to like feed me meat. That was something that I had to go through, and like it was just always something I had to explain and defend rather than just like letting myself be. So that was actually kind of tough.
Yeah, tough, annoying, just all of it.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I still get the question till this day, like, "Oh, but what do you eat?" And I was like, "Do you not realize that Indian food, like the cuisine was built for vegetarians, right? Like, I
Yeah,
have so much to eat.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
fine."
yeah, yeah. And even the the Jain culture, they are even more restrictive, and they don't eat onions, they don't eat garlic, and they have an entire cuisine made for them.
Right. Yeah. No, I know. I mean, I always tell people like Indians know how to make vegetables taste good. We just don't like steam our vegetables like they do here. Like, I'm so sick of eating steamed vegetables when I go to like friends' parties. I'm like, you need to make like YouTube an Indian recipe and like let's get this over with.
Yeah, it's just and the spices. It's one of my friends, she was cooking for me and she made Indian food with spices from scratch. And it was
Yeah.
just, I was like, oh my God, this is just like flavor explosion overload. It's just like creating all this paste from scratch. And I was like, oh my God, I totally get why you would be so obsessed with this because who wouldn't? It's just so delicious.
Yeah, absolutely. And that always takes you back to your culture too. Like my mom has been cooking this her whole life, and I always associated that with being home, being Indian, all that stuff. And actually, speaking of Sudarshan, our common friend, so we were just hanging out about a month ago, and I don't cook. Like I hate cooking. And he sat me down and said, "We're cooking today." So we went to the Indian store. We bought all the spices, all the vegetables, and we made this like three-course Indian meal, and it was delicious. And now I think I'm gonna cook now. So
Yeah, and you just you start small, right?
right,
You start
exactly.
small. I wanted to go back to kind of your, we didn't touch on it, but I wanted to talk a little bit about how you realized you were gay, you know, in the group of friends, but even just for yourself. Was there a turning point when you've had a specific experience or a certain thought that made you realize, oh, I'm gay?
Yeah, so I would say in high school it was very much on the back of my mind. I don't think there was kind of one moment that I realized it, but it was just still a realization that just like, oh, my eyes tend to look more towards men, just in the general population. So that was something I very ha actively had to fight all throughout high school. Even with my friends coming out, I just never thought that was me. Um, and it wasn't until college when, at the same time, I was kind of exploring my Indian identity, I was exploring my identity in general. And I remember sitting in class one day, at some lecture or something, and I think it just hit me, and I was like, "Oh, damn it, I think I'm gay." Like, it's hit me like a
Yeah.
brick wall, and I was like, "All right, well, let's do this."
Yeah. What class was
Um,
that?
well, I wasn't paying attention, so I
Uh,
don't know.
that's so funny. Was it like a classmate or was it a professor when you were just like, oh, I'm gay?
I think I was just in my head. It was sophomore year of college, and like the whole first year of college, I was in my head about, what I want. Especially because everyone around you, everyone gets to college, they're having fun, like meeting people, dating, and that just never interested me. And asking myself why, I reached that answer one day in class. So,
Yeah, and
yeah.
I think culturally too, Berkeley is so different from Rancho Cucamonga, and people are more expressive, but being out is a lot safer too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Right. I think, there's always that fear of when you come out, you're going to be rejected. People aren't going to talk to you. They're going to look at you different. And in fact, I didn't even like I came out to myself in sophomore year, and then I didn't tell people until junior year. It took me a whole nother year to do that. But when I did start telling people, no one was shocked. They're like, "Yeah, we know. We were just waiting." Um, and yeah, I didn't receive, and not only did I not receive any pushback or hate or whatever, I received just so much support from everyone I knew. So that made things a lot
Yeah,
better.
gotcha. Amazing. For myself, navigating being gay was something I went through college too. And it's interesting because I was out to my friends, out to all the people that I worked with, but who I wasn't out with was my family. And
Hmm.
it took me quite some time to navigate this conservative culture from the Japanese side. So I'm half Japanese and half Taiwanese. And
Yeah.
navigating both of these conservative cultures and being gay at home was a whole nother experience. And I'm just curious if you have any experience with navigating being gay within your Indian culture at home.
Yeah, so one wrinkle there. I'm actually
Yeah.
not out to my parents yet.
God.
Um,
Yeah.
I haven't done that yet. And the timing of this is kind of fortuitous because I'm planning to come out to my mom within a week. Um, Yeah, so it's a lot of things happening. But similar to other Asian cultures, Indian culture is very conservative. And I think it's even made more so because, at least for my parents' generation, there's a big culture of arranged marriages. Um, so it's this idea that you're not marrying for love. You're marrying because you have to, and that's what's done. And you don't really have, well, you don't have any choice in your partner, at least back then. My parents didn't. They were just told that here's the person you're marrying. Good luck for the rest of your life. That being said, I mean they're very happy in their marriage now, but that's just how things were set up. So the idea of like not just conservative culture, but like you have really high expectations because you're expected to
Mm,
get married in the way your
yeah,
parents want you to.
yeah.
You're expected to get married to the quote unquote right type of Indian, like the exact area, the state, language, religion, culture that you're from. um, with the arranged marriages, kid parents kind of have put everything in their kids, right? Because there's not necessarily that marriage for love. They put all their love into their kids. Um, so there's even higher expectations that they meet these really high expectations that their parents set out for them. And then on top of all of that is you take that and then bring that to America, right? So we have our parents who sacrifice literally their entire lives, everything they knew and their livelihood for their kids so they can have a better life in this country. Um, so yeah, expectations are sky high, and I'm very aware of that. So that's why I think for me, and I'm a 30-year-old man now, I haven't been able to do that. But I am planning to. It's just a matter of you know, just finding the right time, the right
Mm,
moment, the right space, all that.
wow, wow. Coming out is your own journey, and I always recommend people to only do it when you feel you're ready, regardless of whatever people recommend you to do or whatever you read in whatever literature. It's whenever you feel comfortable, whenever you feel safe, and whenever you feel ready.
Right. And I'm finding that, people say, just give yourself time. And I'm finding that really is the answer. I just needed time. Just thinking through it, kind of slowly exposing at least my mom to like different ideas of being queer and to kind of get her ready. So yeah, I was talking to a friend the other day and they kind of made me realize that when you come out to yourself, you had like 20 plus years to deal with it, right?
Yeah.
Whereas you tell your parents, they haven't. They just find out right away. And they're going to need potentially years to maybe get to where you are now, right? So having that, just being aware of that and having that expectation when you tell them makes things hopefully easier on both parties.
That's really good advice. Is there anything that's inspiring you to come out now? It's funny because I have some Asian friends who are a little on the older generation, but
Hmm.
they just will never tell their parents, and they're like, it shouldn't matter. My sexuality shouldn't matter. That part of my life is not important, and so they are from the books that just not telling them at all. And I'm just curious, what is inspiring you to come out to your family?
Yeah. So, I think there was a time, probably several years ago, where I was like, oh, I'm just never going to tell them, I'm going to tell them I'm single for the rest of my life. But I think a couple of things changed. One is that, another part of Indian culture is marriage is a really big deal. And you get the questions constantly of like, hey, when are you getting married? When are you getting married? Are you married yet? So that pressure is very much there. So I want to hopefully alleviate that a little bit by, yeah, hey, I'm still going to get married, but maybe not exactly how you expected.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, so I want to tone down those expectations.
yeah.
And the other reason is that I think as I get more comfortable with my gay life in San Francisco, and just fully realize what I want my life to be, I realize that I can't live with this lie that much longer. Because I do have a close relationship with my parents, and there's this huge, gigantic part that they don't know about me. So I want them to know the whole me because that's who I am and that's who they gave birth to. And So hopefully that goes well.
Mm. Yes, I definitely hope it goes really well too. And whatever
Thank you.
happens, yeah, you definitely have a whole community that supports you with whatever you decide to do. So, regardless
Yeah,
of what we talk about on this podcast or, what we do in our regular life, I'm a resource and I hope you can also reach out to your community for support as well.
yeah. Thank you so much. I'm realizing, just like simple conversations and getting little nuggets of advice really go far.
And one thing I wanted your thoughts on. So, I have noticed as a part of doing my work, creating spaces, and even just a larger context of just a conversation of who is an Asian in media. Oftentimes, when people refer to Asians, they typically just refer to East Asians, right? Koreans,
Right.
Chinese, Japanese. And I think lately they are being more inclusive with Southeast Asians. So they're now
Hmm.
starting to think about Thai people, Cambodians, and Singaporeans. But oftentimes, Indians and South Asians are left out of that conversation. And so I'm
Hmm.
curious from your perspective, why is this the case, and what can we do to be more inclusive?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Right. I think the South Asian identity is seen as so different, Um, and I think even within the South Asian identity, there's just so much there. There's Pakistan, India, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal. And then within India, pretty much each state is almost like its own little country. So there's just so much there. And I think, at least what I've observed, is that from an American standpoint, I think because like physically we look different than say East Asians. There's always just been a very like never being able to associate those two together, which has been really unfortunate because I think just generally Asian culture has a lot of similarities. We talked about the conservative aspect of it, but not just that. There's like the family values part of it, right? Like family is very important, community is very important. A lot of those values are really shared across the Asian continent. So I think trying to focus on that and talking about what brings us together and makes us Asian is the
Mm,
way to go.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think we all can do a better job of, whenever we say Asian, being more inclusive with representation of South Asians from all different areas of the world.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I would say at least in the last couple of years, South Asian representation has been growing a lot, which has been great to see. I think people are kind of realizing that there's a lot of us. Um, yeah, understatement of the century. And that, we have something to say. So that's been really encouraging to see.
Yeah. It's China. China and India are two of the most populated countries in the entire world.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's just by sheer manpower, human power. There's so many people there than in the West. But just because the West has just such a cultural dominance over the East, it's hard to forget just how different it is over there. But I think we're slowly starting to see a change, and as East Asian, South Asian, Asian culture in general becomes more visible in the West, then people will realize that we're not that different.
Exactly, exactly. And what I'm excited about is a lot of the technologies, especially from China, but also a lot of the technologies from India are starting to become much more massive. And, like their version of Amazon slash Alibaba, they have Flipkart, and it's
Hmm.
becoming larger and larger and larger. And I think it is hard to ignore these identities and these cultures once they become dominant players in the larger capitalistic ecosystem. And I'm really excited about just these companies, these organizations getting bigger, and not just for the country, but also really for representation in the global ecosystem.
Right, and I've always said that just exposure to different cultures just goes so far, and realizing that there are different people out there, and it's really great that technology has made this exposure so easy. made this visibility so, so accessible at your fingertips. So that's, I think it's only going to
Yeah.
get closer after
Yeah.
this.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I kind of want to get into the meat of the conversation, which is on love. And so, quick question for you. What's your current status? Are you single, partnered, looking?
I'm single and I think I'm happy with it. Let's go with that.
No, that's amazing. A lot of people are single, but they're really unhappy.
Yeah. Yeah, I still think I'm navigating my singledom, but it's cool.
No, that's amazing. And just curious, what led you to being happy single?
Oh yeah, for sure. So I have only ever had one relationship in my career, if you want to call it. So I was with someone for about 4 years, and that ended 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the past 2 years I've been figuring out what I want, and I'm just realizing it's such a hard question to answer. And you think it'd be really easy, right? Like, oh, like, what am I into? Who am I attracted
Yeah,
to? How do I
yeah,
want to spend my time with someone? And as a 30-year-old man, I still can't answer that question. Um, but I think that's why I'm happy being single because I'm just exploring what else is out there. And I think after 2 years of, breaking up, being on the apps, meeting all these people, I'm kind of finding solace in not meeting anyone and just being by myself, at least romantically, and just like allowing myself to ask those questions of what makes me happy, not just in this moment, but long term.
yep.
So that's been a very useful conversation.
Mm. Yeah, if you can't love yourself, you really can't love other people.
Amen.
Yeah. And so you mentioned a little bit of dating apps. What are your thoughts on dating apps?
Oh God, that
Y-
could be a whole nother podcast.
Yeah. Let's get into it.
Yeah. So, I mentioned I was in this relationship for 4 years, and that was really my first kind of anything with like anything being serious with another person, being gay with another person, all that. So I hadn't experienced the apps until my late 20s, because the whole, it was a monogamous relationship, and I was happy in it at the time. But always in the back of my mind, I had this thought of like, oh, I wonder what the apps are like, especially because it's almost like this requirement that if you're gay, you have to be on the apps. You have to just experience that life, because everyone else is, and that's just how people meet each other these
Yeah,
days.
it's all
Um,
over social media too. Everyone's taking screenshots of their apps, and it's so commonplace.
right, exactly. I mean, so I actually met my ex in person at a bar, which when I was telling
Wow.
people that, they
Yeah.
were shocked. They're like, "You met in person? You didn't meet over an app?"
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that shows how much times have changed. So, when I did eventually got out of that relationship and joined the apps, I think there was that initial excitement of just like, oh, like a kid in a candy store. Um, but once I realized just how much work it is just to meet people and have like meaningful connections, I realized that it's not something I think I want to spend a lot of time on. I think I've been really lucky though in that the first year I met some of my best friends today through the apps.
Really?
Um,
Really?
yeah, and that's one thing I did not expect. Um, like I kind of went in like, oh, I'm single, I'm just gonna hook up a bunch, great, this will be fun. But
Yeah.
then as you meet people and you hook up with them, whatever, I'm like, oh, these are actually cool people. I should be friends with them.
That is so
Um,
fascinating. Did you meet up with them with the intention of hooking up and then you realize you were friends, or did you I'm just so curious how that happened.
yeah, so usually it's like you meet with the intention of hooking up, and then you realize like, oh, you have stuff to talk about after, and then we hang out after that, and then I become like I kind of friend zone them, right? So I'm like, great, that's how we met, but like now we're friends, so we're not going to do that anymore. And it's worked out really well, and I've made some great connections there. To the point, yeah, to the point now where I I have like at least the first year I did have like a lot of like just regular hookups that weren't that didn't lead to connections, and I think I'm kind of over that just because I get way more out of say, I don't know, 20 minutes of a hookup versus like months and months of an actual relationship with someone, like building a connection. And again, not to yuck anyone's yum, and if people want to hook up, that's great, that's awesome. I had my phase, but I'm realizing that okay, like I've had it, and what's next? Where can I take it from here?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Different flavors for different people, but the dating apps are really suited just for people who really want a lot, a lot of different hookups and really quick hookups. I feel like you send a couple messages and then all of a sudden you get a dick pic and you're like, oh, like,
Well, if it's 2 a.m., that's okay. But if it's like brunch time, I'm like, let's have a
yeah.
conversation.
I was like, what? I was watching someone use the app. It was so, I don't know, it felt a little intrusive. I was just standing in the subway here in New York City and someone was sitting
Yeah,
down. I was standing up and I wasn't even trying to look. They were just using their phone right in front of my face and they're on
yeah.
Grinder and they're just flipping through all these messages and flipping through dick pics nonchalantly. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is really intense.
Clutching your pearls.
Yeah, I know. I was like, oh my, I'm like sweating here. I don't know. And I was like, oh my gosh. And it's just, it's so interesting because we went from, let's say 15, 20 years ago when it was so taboo, right? To even have a dick pic in a photo, let alone send it to people. And now it's just almost like a business card. Some people have mentioned. It's just like you send it. And
Business
it's
card.
like,
That's
yeah.
pretty funny.
I'm like,
Yeah.
interesting. Okay.
Well, and the one thing I'm very wary with that is like I'm scared that like you almost depersonalize it, right? Like they're just like people are just like transactions, they're just pictures. You don't realize there's an entire personality and history and like story behind each picture and each person. And it's so easy with so much choice and just how easy it is to get this stuff to not realize that. So I'm trying to get better at that, and realizing like, yeah, this is great, but like I want to just get to know the person behind that too, because you're here for a reason and I'm here for a reason, and let's talk more about that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. One thing about no, no, I was gonna say podcast, not podcast. One thing about the dating apps I have seen that I just really absolutely hate is when I read people's bios and and back then it was way more pervasive. People were writing no blacks, no Asians, no femmes,
Hmm. Hmm.
and a lot of these people will say, well, it's just a preference. Why can't I just say what's my preference in my bio? And I'm curious if you have a perspective on this.
Yeah, well, I agree. You used to see that a lot more, but you still see a lot like people say mask all the time. Yeah, I'm mask, and I was like, I really like don't know what that means. Um, but it's fine. It's I mean, yeah, obviously it's really unfortunate.
Yeah.
I think you say it's just a preference, but you're already making prejudgment about someone, right? Um, you're judging them based off of like the color of their skin, their behavior, the way they act. But I mean, who someone is, their actual personality, you're not even letting them get to show that to you. If you're setting up all these judgments beforehand. So I mean, yeah, it's a preference, but like, is it? Like, how do you have a preference against like an entire group of people? How can you just cast judgment on so many people at once without getting to know them and seeing if you could really click? That's I think that's it kind of bums me out, but yeah.
Yeah. Have you faced any of this personally while you were on the dating apps?
I guess I'm lucky to say that I don't think I have directly. Um, I think generally, given all that I'm pretty into Indian things, I tend to talk to Indian people more
Ah, yeah.
on there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a preference. No,
Mm, yeah, yeah.
no, I mean, I'll talk to
Yeah.
anyone, but I think
Yeah.
it just kind of happens because I tend to like enjoy spend my time talking about, just my cultural activities and all that stuff, and that I connect with people easier on that. So I haven't really experienced like someone not wanting to talk to me because of the way I look, or the way I act or anything. But I hear about it all the time, especially. I think in San Francisco, I live in San Francisco here. We're kind of lucky that it's fairly diverse, but folks in other parts of the country where they may be the only Asian in like 50 miles, then I think they hear that stuff all the time.
Yeah, and it's I think we have to really be conscientious, especially what we write in our bio and how we want people to feel. It's I get you have a preference or whatever, and I won't argue, you know, what you want to defend as what you like, but what I will defend is how that makes someone feel. And if you
Hmm.
put out into the open what your thoughts are, whatever, if it makes someone feel terrible, if it makes someone feel belittled, if it makes someone feel any less of themselves, I don't think that's
Hmm.
right.
Right. I mean, especially because people are already really vulnerable being on the apps, right? You're putting yourself out there saying, hey, here's me. I want to meet strangers. It takes a lot just to get there. So then to take them down from there is just, it's just not fair.
Agreed, agreed. And I was curious, if you were to give yourself, a younger yourself, some advice on navigating love, what would it
Yeah.
be?
That's a good one because I feel like I still need that advice now. Um, yeah, so I guess tying back to what I was talking about earlier, and this kind of answers the reason of why I want to truly come out is I think I've held back on really being able to give myself to someone and really being able to love because I'm not fully out, right? Um, I feel like because that person will essentially be a lie to, say, my parents and my family. I don't want to like commit to someone. I don't want to give in because that's not fair. I want to be fully out. So I'd say, at least to my younger self, like figure that stuff out first. Figure out who you are before you want to love someone else, because once you have someone else there, you have an entire set of emotions and, just this whole plethora of issues to deal with. It's a lot of variables in play. So the more you have a better sense of who you are, I mean, you're never going to get fully there because that's something that we try to figure out our whole lives. But the more realized you are, at least in your queerness, your homosexuality, that's only going to make things that much easier.
Yeah. And what is some advice you can give to somebody to become more confident about these identities or to explore it further?
Yeah. So when I first came out, at least to myself back in the classroom, I remember thinking that same day, oh man, I must be like the only gay Indian in the world. Like I really thought that it just wasn't common. There wasn't anyone else like me. And it's over these 10 years I realized, oh wow, there's a lot, So really realizing that you're not alone. People are going through the exact same struggle, and they understand just the nuances of what goes into being gay and Indian. So whatever resources you can take advantage of and like find either individual people, organizations, anything, and just having those conversations. Try to do that. Try to do that as early as you can. Especially because like you do it without shame. Like people are there literally to help you, to make sure that you don't have to go through what they went through. So just embrace that.
Oh, that's amazing. And I know you are involved in quite a lot in San Francisco, and I'm just
Too
curious.
much.
I'm just curious if you could share with the listeners just what do you do? What are you involved in San Francisco and what they can use as resources?
Yeah. So I'm involved in kind of two big projects or volunteer opportunities here in San Francisco. The first is called ASHA for education. ASHA actually means hope in Hindi. And it's a national organization, and there's a chapter here in San Francisco. And we raise money for education projects in India. So the idea is we fundraise money here and send that to like really small scale projects in India that could use the funding. And I fundraise by planning an event called Holi, which is the Indian Festival of Color. So I'm sure people have seen like Indian people covered in color on the internet. That's what that is. It's Holi. It happens in the spring. And I've been playing that event for actually about 10 years now.
Wow,
Um,
wow.
yeah, back in college and now in San Francisco. And it's something I'm super passionate about. So that's coming up actually in just about a month in San Francisco. And if all goes well, we're hoping to have up to 4,000 people there.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
s-
Wow.
yeah, so it's a
Yeah.
hopefully big deal.
Yeah, yeah.
And then the other thing I'm involved in, and this is actually fairly new, there's a queer, trans, GNC South Asian organization that just started in San Francisco in the Bay Area, which is called Parivar, which means family in Hindi. So the idea is, through this organization, we create events, hold space, panel discussions, create safe spaces um, for those that members of that community. Because, as I mentioned, kind of, I guess my theme through this whole conversation is the idea that you're not alone being
Mm-hmm.
both queer and South Asian, because
Yeah.
there are people who are going through that all the time. So the hope of this organization is to create areas for those people to not only meet each other, but be visible for that community in the greater San Francisco area, Bay Area, and just create those resources for them. So that's
Mm.
fairly new, and let's see what that'll turn into. But I'm very excited about it.
Oh, amazing, amazing. And yeah, we'll include the organizations and the names of them in the show notes. So definitely check them out. I think you should
Thank
definitely
you.
check them out. Yeah, I think people should check these out regardless of if they're South Asians, you know? I think,
Oh yeah.
yeah, I think it's always great to check out other organizations to learn how we can best support each other, you know?
Absolutely. And I think one of the reasons I love planning the first event I talked about, Holi, is because it's one that appeals to literally everyone, right? It's just a day where you come, you dance to great Bollywood music, you throw color on people. We have people in San Francisco who come from literally every background that you can imagine. And they all come together as like one big community and just have a good time. So it's a really great just experience to really let people learn about Indian culture, but just have fun. So it's great.
Amazing. And Holy looks so good on social media. It's so colorful. You have like everyone covered in all of this color. And I think it's such an amazing opportunity.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, you wear white when you first show up,
Yeah.
and then by the end you leave like a rainbow. So
Yes, Rainbow. Okay, so I have some quick rapid fire questions for you at the
okay,
end. Okay, are you ready?
yes.
Okay, so first question is, what do we need more of in love?
Ooh, I would say awareness,
Mm,
awareness of oneself and awareness of the other person and where they are on their emotional journey.
amazing. And kind of on the flip side of that, what do we need less of in love?
I maybe expectations.
Mm,
Just having unfair expectations of where you think someone should be versus where you are.
yeah, that's a good one. And last one, what is inspiring you lately?
Um, Good question. Probably my friends.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surrounded by a really good group of people, and I that if I see them just doing amazing things, I want to do it with them, and we can just support and inspire each other.
Amazing, amazing. Well, thank you so much, Rajiv. It was an absolute joy to have you. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, I appreciate it. This is really fun, actually. So thank you so much.
Yes, and quick question for you. How can our listeners find you or reach out to you?
Oh yeah, I'm on Instagram
Mm-hmm.
at Raju the Boy, RajuTheboy.
Mm. Okay, slide into your DMs, right?
Go for it.
Amazing. And that's it for this episode of Yellow Glitter on Love. And if you want to get in touch with me, you can reach out to me via my Instagram at Stephen Wakabayashi. And with that, thank you so much, Rajiv. It was such an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.
Amazing. And with that, so much love for you and hope your day can be a little bit more mindful. Bye now.